Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. I'd like to thank everyone for being here today. We are very excited to have you. We have a lot of participants who've been able to join us, and that's wonderful. We're excited to be here with representatives from the Department of Defense to explain a little bit about ANAB Accreditation and the DoD Cyber Workforce Qualification Program. This is being recorded, and we would like to hear from any attendees who have questions, but please put them in the chat, and at the end of the webinar, we will go over them and try and get you some answers. My name is Caitlin O'Connell. I am a Senior Accreditation Manager with ANAB with the credentialing program. I'm going to go over our webinar content for today and then introduce our first speaker. So first, we're going to hear from the DoD about Directive 8140. They're going to go over the types of eligible programs, a little bit about work roles, and the DoD process of recognition. Then we'll, from ANAB, we'll talk about what our accreditation process looks like. We'll describe the difference between some of our accreditation programs and also give you some resources that you can pursue if you'd like to learn more. And again, we'd like to hear from you, so please, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat or save them to the end, and then we'd like to address all of them. So I'm just going to start us off, I'm going to unmute our first speaker. If I can find him in the attendee list. So let's see. Sorry.
Kayla, can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, Matt, is that you?
That is.
Okay, great. So we found him and he's here and we can hear him. So I would like to introduce Mr. Matt Eisner, DoD CIO WID Workforce Development Branch Chief. Matt, go on. It's up to you now.
Thank you very much. And I do want to say that it was a feat for Caitlin to find me because DoD loves to do wonderful filters. So I am not only in the WebEx meeting on my browser, I have to telephone in as well. So trying to find my number is a feat for her. So thank you, Caitlin. I appreciate that. And thank you, everyone, especially VJ, for inviting me to this so that we can talk all about the wonderful things that we're doing in the department and where we're going in the future. So first, as Caitlin kind of mentioned, I'm Matthew Eisner. I work in the office of the CIO for the Department of Defense. Our branch or directorate is called the WID, Workforce Innovation Director. And what we kind of do is, while a lot of CIO offices focus on tech, the infrastructure, all of those standards, we focus on what we consider our most important asset, the people. So we do a lot of standards, policy driving, oversight in the area of individuals themselves, trying to make the lives of what we call our operators or our people that are doing the job as easy as possible and giving them the resources and tools to do it. So with that, under my kind of purview, I have kind of two main big buckets, a lot of other small things going on as well. But the main ones is what we call the DCWF, the DoD Cyber Workforce Framework. Within that, we kind of codify all of the specialties inside of tech that we ultimately kind of consider part of this ecosystem of digital. And when I say cyber, I don't necessarily just mean cybersecurity. I mean IT, cybersecurity, cyber ops, intel, AI, data, software engineering, even our enablers, our people that support us, that come into our various operational units like acquisitions or legal or HR. Basically, what we want to be able to do is have some kind of familiarization of these individuals, that they have some kind of requisite knowledge base coming in so that they're successful in their job. And we don't have to, you know, there's a lot of operations. Everyone on here is probably very familiar Cyber is a hot button topic right now. Everyone's getting hacked. So we have to bring people in as qualified as possible to make sure we're kind of meeting the criteria. So within that framework, we've got 72 work roles. It's a very massive, you know, kind of overhaul of, you know, knowledge and skills in those arenas. And what we kind of do is codify exactly what the capabilities are of those people, what their day-to-day jobs are, how they construct that, and kind of build this, what we call our building blocks of a end state person inside of every organization. From the OSD level, we can never really be so prescriptive that we define every little knowledge base, every skill that an individual is going to have, because we have such a massive organization that every mission is different, every organization is different, and they all have different focal points. So we have to give some of the flexibility, but we try to kind of meet to that 60 to 70% criteria where we leverage those individuals to make sure they kind of have that standardized concept. But with that, we want to make sure, and this is kind of the concept behind it, is that individuals inside of this arena have similar skill sets. So if we have surge capability, if we have to maneuver individuals, if we have to go after talent, recruitment, retention, all of those wonderful buzz terms, we have a understanding of what they're able to do, where we need to find the talent, how we can communicate with our partners. And that's kind of the main forum kind of talking to you guys, which is kind of crucial for us, is we established, finally signed in February 2023, the final piece of our 8140 qualification program. Inside of that, what we ultimately did is I mentioned the 72 work roles inside. We have identified our workforce. So everyone inside of this arena, inside of the department, has to code their people against these 72 work roles. And we're talking roughly 225 to 300,000 individuals inside of this kind of ecosystem of cyber. So every one of them is mandated to kind of go in and code against it. But we don't stop there. We want to make sure that they have some requisite knowledge base skills. So we leverage on another requirement of qualifications. And 8140 has kind of three parts to the qualifications. It has the baseline foundations. So what we're trying to do is find certifications, training, academia, range environments, sandboxes, experience, those types of things that is known in the community, and validate their content and making sure that they have they're teaching the knowledge and skills that we want our people inside of the department to come in with. Because what we want to do is make sure that the individuals coming in have the aptitude, have the ability to do their job. So that's kind of our baseline foundation area. The second piece that we ultimately want to do is a residential. So it's kind of building blocks that I mentioned before, is every organization is different. So now we start layering on more knowledge and skills. So there's more training, there's more qualifications that these individuals have to meet. And then at the end of the day, you've got your continuous professional development. We got to make sure cyber changes on a rapid pace in this. So we got to make sure our operators, our people on the net, have that skill set and can consistently change with the environment. So that kind of brings us to kind of the talking point here is 8140 has a requirement to make sure that we go out to industry, commercial providers, all of the areas out there to find the best content. And in there, we have our wonderful cert providers like SANS and CompTIA and ISACA and all of them. And then in our training side, we also have various individuals like Pluralsight or Coursera or Udemy or those areas. But what we need to be able to do is, from our higher level, make sure we have some kind of accreditation. We got to make sure that it has some meat behind it. Individuals go into the organization and understand the building blocks of the organization, the concepts. They're capable of performing the training, and they're not kind of just out there trying to make a buck off the department. So that's where we've had a wonderful partner with ANAB, BJ, and his team for everything they do, going through and helping us with the heavy lift that is 8140. I mentioned the massive amounts of people. as we're standing up this program, there's a lot of interest in not only cert providers, but training providers coming into this environment. So they are definitely stepping up to the plate with abilities to kind of receive a lot of packages, kind of in those two main standards of your ISO 17024 and your ANAB 2659. Those are the two main things that we require from the department. For anybody coming into what we call our 8140 catalog, they must have that criteria from an accreditation body on top to make sure that we can kind of have that comfortability. Then we have a follow-on validation tool from the department that we just layer on a second level of validation to make sure that the content is good. So it's you know, wonderful government. We overdo some of these things, but it's crucial for us. We're a lot of these things that we have inside of this program is tied to job performance. It's tied to jobs. So people can lose their jobs if they don't meet their criteria. If they don't have these things coming in, we won't actually go out and seek individuals that don't have qualifications. So there's a lot that is riding on this. So we have to make sure that we have kind of all of our ducks in a row and make sure that we meet those criteria. And that's, again, why the partnerships with BJ and his team from ANAB is so crucial to what we do in the department and always are appreciative. All right, I think I've talked enough about 8140. I'll go to the next slide. So in massive amounts, and this is very daunting, and we, for anybody on the call that would like this, we can provide you a soft copy. Also, if you go onto our DISA Cyber Exchange, and I'll put the link into the chat, it gives you a lot of content of what we mean by a lot of these. So you see some of the names on here when you say like a cyber defense analyst. If you go onto our DISA Cyber Exchange, dive into the weeds, you look at the knowledge and skills of what we mean by a cyber defense analyst. I wouldn't be too hung up on the actual naming convention. I know industry calls them something. Some of our federal partners call them other things. The naming convention is just, you know, something that we came up with in the department to make sure that our individuals understand it, but it's not necessarily always the, you know, the lens that somebody else is looking at. So I always kind of suggest to people to kind of go into the massive Excel files and documents inside of our platform in the DISA Cyber Exchange to make sure you understand what we mean by each one of those. But basically what we do, and we constantly go out and advocate, is to all the people inside of the environment. I go to a conference once a month, and I'm talking to various providers, various industry individuals, and even academia across the board to come to our system and basically put in their content, put in their learning objectives, their curriculums, all of those things inside of the environment, and then kind of go through the process to start kind of lining up to our work roles. Obviously, we are trying to make this as robust as possible. We want to give as many options to our stakeholders inside of the department as possible. If I have 1,000 different offerings for one work role, that's amazing to us. There's so many people inside of this whole cyber team that there's no one solution for anything. So we got to make sure that we get as robust as possible, have as much coming into the quals matrix as we can, and then kind of come up with solutions at the back half. This document is always ever changing. While we try to keep it as static as possible, the main concepts of, you know, a cyber defense analyst doesn't change as frequent, but we have to be responsive to our operational entities as things go, as we learn more information from, you know, certain hacks or, you know, adversary things coming in, we got to make sure we are responsive. So we always kind of have that ability to change within, you know, a quick period of time, but we try to do it on a 2-year cycle where we bring a bunch of SMEs in and they kind of look through and start kind of evaluating a lot of this content. So it's a very robust process. You know, one of these elements takes us anywhere from 6 to 9 months to do. when we first stood all of this up, it took us almost 2 years to finalize all of this. So there's a lot of input, there's a lot of content that goes into it, but it is constantly being looked at and is never as static as I would like. All right, and I think I'll go to the last slide. So I wanted to, again, I mentioned it on the first slide, receiving, the whole actual process itself, but I wanted to kind of really hammer this in is as we go out and advocate, we talk to our cert providers, our training providers, anybody in the environment, we always want them to come in, but we always layer on, this is the process to go into it. We always will lay out the websites. We can also put that in here so that people can kind of visually see some of what we're talking about. But it is always, the starting point is those accreditation bodies on top. It's always the ISO 17024, it's always the ANAB 2659. DJ and team has done a wonderful job putting all of this criteria together, and we leverage it as much as we possibly can. Obviously, we're always looking for streamlining it as much, and DJ has been amazing in his accommodations to help us try to do that, try to get these people through as quickly as possible. But this is ultimately the end state of where we need to go, where individuals come in, they get their accreditation on top, they walk through. Once they get that accreditation, they can start putting together their package on our side and start putting in their learning objectives and knowledge and skills, alignment to knowledge and skills and work roles. So we can start kind of evaluating them from our side. So there's two kind of pieces to this. We've got ANAB has their evaluation piece of the organization and broader. We have it from the actual content down below to make sure that everything's going through. So there's a lot of rigor that goes to making sure this stuff comes out at the back half is completely validated, completely vetted, and is useful for our stakeholders in the department. So once they are finally accredited and approved, they will go through the final tranche. They'll get signed off, and then they'll be put into what we call our 8140 quals matrix. When I mentioned that, that big work role page before, the one right before this, it had 7 different elements. We're going to have quals matrix for every single work role, every single element in there, so that our stakeholders can go in there and they will be aligned to a certain work role and they can find exactly how they can qualify against it. So you can kind of see, there's one in the chat, you can see the cyber exchange, that's our quals matrix. At the bottom of this, you also have our DoD emerging tech area that has a lot of information from what we do in the department. And also this cyber exchange is kind of the main authoritative site that has everything that we need to be able to kind of move forward. So I think that is, I don't know if that's the last of my slides. I don't know, Caitlin, are we transitioning over to Tron and then to questions?
That's right. So that's the last of your slides.
Perfect. Well, I will stay around and answer as many questions as possible.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Please put any questions you have in the chat. I'd now like to introduce Dr. Turan Ayvaz, who is the Senior Director for Credentialing at ANAB. And Turan, go ahead.
Thank you. Before Caitlin goes in deep down to accreditation process, I would like to explain a little bit between the certificate and certification programs, both you hear of those names and also the correlated standards, ISO IC 1724 and NC ASTM E2659. Basically, the certificate program is an educational program which focuses the educational process and also an assessment for the intended learning outcomes. Whereas the certification is a third-party independent assessment whether an individual demonstrates the minimum competency of that particular job or skill area. So when you think about that, certificate program It can include any type of learning and training programs, starts and ends in a period, and then basically measures what the learning outcomes should attain by those participants. Whereas certification is just a one time, it measures whether that particular individual demonstrates that competency that he or she has the minimum competency of that particular job or skill area. So as you can see, the core components for the certificate programs are learning event. The learning event could be any type of organization of topics, could be in class, online, competency-based, flipped, any type of new methodologies you may think of, and also assessment of the learning outcomes. Those are the two major components. In the certification side, the core components are eligibility requirements, assessment, but the assessment here is different than the assessment of certificate programs. Assessment here is measuring whether you have that particular knowledge and skill of the competency, and that basically mainly developed based on a job test analysis. And also a demonstration of continued competence throughout the recertification. So it means that you have to possess those knowledge and skills and abilities while you are certified. Some of the attributes for the certificate programs and certifications. Certificate programs cannot be revoked, meaning that once you attain that certificate in area, doesn't matter how dumber you become later in your life, no one can take away from you. And also it can grant a designation, optional designation or acronym. But the caveat here, that designation or acronym should not imply a certification, meaning that you cannot use the term certification, certified, or any type of terminology that may imply a certification program. In the certification side, the attributes are, it can be revoked for incompetence or some unethical conduct, and also almost always result in a designation or associated acronym. So these are the major differences of certificate programs and certification programs. And usually, sometimes we hear those programs called as training certifications, meaning that at the end of a training learning program, organizations issue certification. That is a big no-no in this program, and both in DoD 8140 and also in ANAB Accreditation. So if you have, we call it hybrid programs, you have something like that, then you have to choose either one. And at certain situations, you can have both programs as long as you have a firewall between your training learning program and a certification program, meaning that you cannot issue the same individual as the exam prompter as your content developer for the certificate program. So there has to be a firewall of the activities. But at the end, you have to decide if you have something in the between, that what is your goal? Is your goal that you have to train those individuals seeking skills, knowledge, and abilities, which you think there is a knowledge gap in the field? Or your goal is to be a gatekeeper by establishing a certification exam to identify who is qualified and who is not qualified. So those are the main questions I will suggest as a starter. So that will be all for my section, and I'll just turn it over to Caitlin. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Turan. I'm seeing some good questions in the chat, so thank you for those submitting them. Please continue to do so, and we will respond to them shortly. I'm going to talk about the ANAB accreditation process at a high level to give you an overview of how it works. So the first step is a preliminary online application, and this can be submitted at any time that the organization decides they want to pursue accreditation. The first thing to do would be to go to our website. You can gather information. The preliminary application form is publicly available there. You can also purchase the standards through the ANSI web store and familiarize yourself with the standards. It can be really helpful to conduct a gap analysis against those just to make sure that you're ready. And then you fill out the preliminary application form. This is free, and it is a very short form. It asks some very basic eligibility requirements. So you can complete that and include supporting documents for evidence. We can't just take your word for anything. We need to see proof. And then you just email us that application and any supporting documents. If you are submitting for certification, that's one application form. And if you're submitting to a certificate program, that's a separate application form. And you can submit both. And additionally, you can include as many programs as you want on each application form, but they are at this point 2 separate application forms. The next step is we will take a look at what you submitted. Now, that word deny is on the slide in front of you. That seems like a pretty harsh word, but it's a free process at this point. So what we do is we take a look and we may say, you know, we need some more clarification in this area, or maybe this evidence is inadequate, and we just let you know. And then you can resubmit the application form. So it is helpful to be as prepared as possible before you do so that we can accept it right away. But if not, we'll let you know and you can submit a new form. Once we're satisfied that all the eligibility requirements on the preliminary application are fulfilled, then we move to step 2, which involves the full application form. So first, I'd like to explain what does it mean when you get approved at that preliminary level. Well, the first thing it means is we're going to invite you to pay the application fee. This is a $3,000 one-time non-refundable application fee. You are also listed on the ANAB online directory as a public applicant. And we give you that full application form with a guidance document that explains, you know, what kind of evidence we're looking for, what some of these terms mean, and things of that nature. Once you receive that full application form, you have 12 calendar months to complete it and submit it. 12 months may seem like a really long time, and many applicants don't need 12 months. They can do it in a much shorter period of time, but others want to take their time with it, and they do take 12 months. And that's completely fine. However, if you exceed that 12-month deadline, the application is considered withdrawn, and you would have to start again from scratch with the preliminary application again and that preliminary application fee again. So we do encourage you to stick with that 12-month deadline. So what is the full application, and what happens next? Once you submit that full application, you submit it online with supporting documents for every claim you make. Once again, we can't take your word for it, so we're going to need proof. Then the assessors will review everything you've submitted and determine whether or not you're in compliance with the standard. If there are any areas of non-compliance, which is typical, the standards are very long and thorough, and so often people don't get full compliance in one shot, they will inform the applicant of those areas of non-compliance, and there will be time permitted to come into compliance in those areas and rectify any issues. Once the assessors are satisfied that the client is in compliance, they make a recommendation to the accreditation committee. So the accreditation committee's role is to make accreditation decisions. So the assessors don't get to decide, the staff doesn't get to decide, but the committee will vote whether or not to grant accreditation. Once that is granted, then you will be listed on the ANAB website as accredited. But initial accreditation is just the beginning. Accreditation is a journey, not a destination. So we have a monitoring system of annual surveillances where that assessor team comes back every year to review. They take a look at any changes that may have been made and just ensure that you're still in compliance with the standard. So in the first year, there is a virtually conducted on-site assessment that usually takes 1 day, and that occurs again on the 3rd year. In the 2nd and 4th year, the assessment is based purely on a review of the documentation that the client has submitted. The assessors may still want to set up a couple calls or clarify information, but there won't be that full one-day virtual on-site. Now, accreditation expires after 5 years. So in that 5th year, you would be invited to apply for reaccreditation, and that restarts the process. So it doesn't include another preliminary application. It doesn't include another application fee, but it does include that full application form, again, with a brand new assessor team who's never met you. They don't know anything about your program, so you're explaining it all from scratch. None of that information from the previous 5 years is going to carry over. We have lots of resources that can help understand the process better and help understand the standards. We offer both a live online course quarterly for both accreditation programs. We also offer a self-paced online version, which can be more manageable time-wise. We do find that our clients say that these are extremely helpful because the workshops are led by our trained, qualified assessors. If as a student of one of these courses, it gives you access to that assessor, so you can ask questions. You can say, hey, for requirement X, we do this. Do you think that's in compliance? And they may be able to help you out with that. And so we do really recommend it. We see much more prepared applications from people who have attended these workshops. However, they are not required and not mandatory. We have additional resources, including a blog that is written by our assessors that addresses some common issues that they frequently see in applications. And then we have other program resources all on our website. Everything is publicly available, so we do encourage you to go to the ANAB website and take a look at what you can find there. And then finally, one of the best resources is us. So if you're interested in learning more about accrediting your certificate programs, I'm the person you would want to reach. And if you're interested in accrediting your certifications, my colleague Catherine Kriebel can help you out with that. And of course, Dr. Turan Ivaz and Dr. Vijay Krishna can also help clarify any of that information. So that's the end of the presentation that we have prepared. I'm going to open up the chat and I'm going to read some of the questions we've received out loud and get some answers. So I think one of the first questions we saw, let's see, okay. One question is, are data or AI work roles added to the list? I think that's a question for Matt.
So we have, when we expanded the scope of the DCWF, we worked with our counterparts in CDAO and R&E and added the AI, data, and software engineering work roles to that. We're still working with them to kind of bring them into the accreditation body of certifications and training. They're coming up with their implementation plan and their strategy for pushing that out to the providers, but it will come at some point.
Great, thank you. Let's see, we got another one here. Certification, here's a question about certification. Does it need to allow for recertification? Is that a requirement, or can it be a one and done? I think I would throw that to Turan or Vijay. Or Eric.
This is Eric. I submitted a response in chat, but 17024, the ISO standard, does require that there is some verification of continuing competence required. And so the standard does call it recertification, and it is a part of what is expected to be accredited with the 17024 credential. In contrast to that, the ASTM standard 2659 does not allow continuing competence. The certificate can expire if that is what is appropriate for that particular training. Certificate could expire after 3 years, which means that someone then would have to retake the course and retake the test. But many programs have no expiration at all, and there is no any kind of mechanism involved with assessing continuing competence. That is not a part of the ASTM 2659 standard.
Eric, thank you for that. Do you mind also explaining the question and answer from Damon Drake to the group in case they're not following the chat?
Yeah, so if I'm understanding the question right, part of the issue is CPE renewal and how does that play into, I'm assuming, the certification, the 17024 accreditation. And renewals are things that many programs will include the CPE kind of engagement. People take courses, there's all kinds of things that might qualify as a continuing ed kind of credit. The program would have to, map out a priori what are the requirements, what qualifies, how do they go about evaluating or verifying that the CPEs have been accomplished to the satisfaction of the program. That would be a part of their recertification plan. Many programs in the 17024 do not require that someone has to retake a test. It might just be involved with the kind of continuing ed or training or activities that they're involved in. That's a part of the program. So that would all get reviewed as a part of the accreditation process.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, we don't have any other questions in the chat right now, but we do have more time. So if anyone has anything on their mind, now would be a great time to share it. In the meantime, if there's anything that you think we've missed, Turan or Matt or DJ, anything else you'd like to share, it would also be a good time to do that. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any more questions come through, and it looks like we've covered everything. So I guess that's where we're going to end it today. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have more questions. This was a very high-level overview, and we'd like to hear from you if there's anything else you'd like to know. So thank you very much for attending, and I wish you well.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.